Are you sick to death of having all of that money stuff kicking around in your bank account? Well then, you've come to the right place, because it's the battle of the stupidly expensive smartphones, as Apple's latest wallet-draining iPhone 15 Pro Max takes on Samsung's eyebrow-raisingly pricey Galaxy S23 Ultra. Now, I've had both of these oversized blowers stashed in my pants for this past week, hence I'm walking a bit funny now. Comparing the camera smarts, the gaming chops, the battery life, all that good stuff. So here's my full iPhone 15 Pro Max versus Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra review. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So let's begin with the design, and it's no real surprise that both of these phones are absolutely freaking massive. The Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra stands a wee bit taller than the iPhone 15 Pro Max at 6.8 inches versus 6.7. They're actually roughly the same thickness, despite the fact that that iPhone feels thicker purely because it's got those flat edges. That's compared with this lovely rounded design here on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. It's only a subtle curvature on that screen now, but it certainly feels more comfortable to clutch compared with the iPhone. But as you can see there, proper full-on rectangular design for the S23 Ultra, whereas the iPhone goes for the slopey corners instead. And the screen on both the Samsung and the Apple blower pretty much fills the front end, very skinny bezels indeed. And the materials are very different here as well. You've got an aluminium frame here on the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Apple has actually upgraded the frame on the iPhone 15 Pro Max to titanium. So the iPhone 15 Pro Max is actually lighter than the S23 Ultra, helped along by the fact that it's a wee bit more compact. But you know, both of these blowers weigh over 200 grams, so if you stash them in your jeans, you're going to want to be wearing a belt. Around back, those camera lenses do jut quite far from the arse end of both of these blowers, excessively so in the case of the iPhone. You've got Gorilla Glass Victus 2 front and back here on the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, nice and durable, no signs of nicks or scratches or anything, despite the fact I've been using this thing for a few months now. And as for the iPhone, well, it's got Apple's ceramic shield glass up front, and then it's just a textured matte glass around back, which has proved less than hardy in several durability tests that have emerged on the YouTube so far. Thankfully, I've got no complaints on that side, no nicks or scuffs or scratches anywhere on that rear end, and I haven't exactly been treating the iPhone 15 Pro Max with utmost respect. And both of these phones come with the added reassurance of being IP68 water and dust resistant as well, so they can be fully submerged if you drop them in the bath, the sink, whatever. It ain't gonna completely f them up. So now the really fun part of any iPhone and Android device comparison, the software. And comparing the two is basically a thankless task, because whichever one you personally prefer will probably be the one you've been using. If you're an iPhone fan, you'll probably think that Android is the devil's diarrhea, whereas most Android users wouldn't piss on iOS if it was on fire. Personally, I'm more enamored with Android. It just makes more logical sense to me. I like the open nature of it, the fact that you can tweak it, customize it, chuck your own launchers on there if you want to completely change the look and feel. I also prefer the way that Android handles notifications, and all of the Google apps and services generally I get on better with compared with their Apple counterparts. That is primarily because I review so many bloody Android devices every single year that I'm using it like 95–96% of the time. But I've got to say, iOS is getting better all of the time, and I do like some aspects of it, like the way you can quickly and easily switch up the lock screen, which also changes the focus mode. I really like that new action button, which as you can see there, I've set as a shortcut to the camera app. But anyhow, if you would like a closer look at that software and the best features of both the Galaxy S23 Ultra and that iPhone 15 Pro Max, well, I've done a full in-depth tips and tricks guide for both of these blowers, so definitely go check those out. They were all a spiffing, if I do say so myself. And the really good news is that both of these blowers are well supported by their manufacturers as well. Samsung is offering 4 years of OS updates with the Galaxy S23 Ultra, and guaranteed you'll get at least that with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So you won't have to haul your expensive new brick in the bin after just a couple of years. Of course, it ain't just the software that's radically different here. The Galaxy S23 Ultra also has a hidden surprise down below. I am of course banging on about that S Pen stylus, which is secreted in this wee orifice here. And this is undeniably handy for scribbling on documents like PDFs before sharing them around, and it's especially good for signing stuff. It's also good for getting all sketchy if you've got any creative talent. And you've also got Samsung's nifty DeX feature as well, which basically allows you to turn this almighty blower into a makeshift computer. Quite handy if you can't be bothered to schlep your laptop to work. And as for security, well, you got face unlock on both of these blowers. You can have this unlock straight to your home screen here on the Galaxy S23 Ultra, whereas you still have to swipe on the iPhone for some reason. It is more secure on the iPhone, however, because you've got the actual time of flight sensor on it. But an alternative and a more secure option here on the S23 Ultra is that ultrasonic sensor, which is built into that almighty bloody screen. You just tap your digit to that and you're straight in. And plenty of great security and privacy tools built into both of these blowers as well. You've also got full eSIM support on the pair of them, as well as physical SIM support, at least if you live here in Blighty. If you live stateside, then you'll be out of luck on that front on the Apple. And with both of these phones, you've got the option of chucking even more cash at Apple and Samsung to upgrade the storage up to 1 TB in total. Very handy if you're shooting a lot of video, for instance. But neither of these phones offer a bit of micro SD memory card support to expand that storage. Now let's chat display tech, and as I mentioned before, the Apple's screen slightly smaller than the Samsung's at 6.7 inches versus 6.8. They are both OLED tech, just by a different name. It's Dynamic AMOLED 2X here on the Galaxy S23 Ultra versus Super Retina XDR on the Apple. The iPhone 15 Pro Max sports a 2796 by 1290 pixel resolution versus the Samsung's 3088 by 1440. So it's a similar pixel density, and basically you can expect supremely sharp visuals. Both phones boast HDR10 Plus support, but Apple has also chucked in Dolby Vision, something that Samsung has shunned for quite some time now. But stick them side by side and you will notice on the default display settings that Samsung clearly produces bolder tones. Those colours are already boosted by the S23 Ultra, so they really pop off the display, while the iPhone offers more sedate aesthetics. As LTPO tech in both cases, the refresh rate ranges from almost static all the way up to 120 Hz on both the S23 Ultra and the iPhone. You've also got the option of setting the S23 Ultra to 60 Hz if you want it to remain there, preserve a bit of the battery life, whereas you don't have that option on the iPhone. As for the brightness, well, no worries. The iPhone 15 Pro Max peaks at 2000-ish nits versus around 1750 on the Galaxy S23 Ultra. There's no real difference to the naked eye under bright sunlight, both are clearly visible. And oh yes, of course, if you do go full screen when kicking back with a movie or a game or whatever on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, that dynamic island, or floating turd as I like to call it, does slightly intrude on the action there compared with the dinky wee selfie orifice on the S23 Ultra. And naturally, as these are already expensive premium smartphones, you've got a stereo speaker setup, so let's check it out. First, the Galaxy S23 Ultra, just max out that volume. You definitely shouldn't do after buying yourself a fresh new iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max is check your bank balance and just depress the living shit out of you. And now let's repeat that with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now the first thing you definitely shouldn't do after buying yourself a fresh new iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max is check your bank balance and just depress the living shit out of you. I gotta say, I prefer the aural output here on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. They're both really bloody loud on that maximum volume, but I think the iPhone holds it together a bit better. The clarity is stronger. That said, they'll both happily do the job if you want to stream a bit of YouTube or Netflix in a really noisy environment. Even if your kid's doing a bit of recorder practice right next to your face, you should still hear what's going on. And there's no headphone jack action here on either the Galaxy S23 Ultra or that iPhone 15 Pro Max. Shock, surprise, but the Bluetooth wireless streaming, absolutely flawless. Now on the performance side of things, well, it's Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 stuffed inside of the S23 Ultra versus the Apple A17 Pro here on the iPhone. And personally, I'm not a massive fan of benchmarking, especially as Geekbench is essentially a different app on iOS and Android. But if you're interested, this is how those scores stack up. So as you can see, clear victory for the iPhone in the tests. But I prefer a bit of real life testing, and certainly the everyday experience super smooth on both of these blowers. And gamers should be more than happy with the performance they get out of a highly demanding title like Genshin Impact. This beast ran beautifully on both the Galaxy S23 Ultra and the iPhone, maintaining a smooth frame rate even when things got completely mental. I did of course run it on the highest possible graphics settings on both phones. You got the added bonus on iOS that you can also boost that refresh rate up to 120 frames per second, whereas it is capped at 60 FPS on Android. As far as gaming tools go though, they're pretty basic on the S23 Ultra, just some do not disturb shenanigans, etc. And they're pretty much non-existent on the iPhone beyond some multiplayer matchmaking and leaderboard shenanigans. As for battery life, well, the S23 Ultra has the larger capacity cell, 5000 mAh versus 4400. And I gotta say, I have found that the Ultra is superior for everyday mixed use. Even a full week on, the iPhone still drains far too quick. Especially when you're streaming music in the background, that really seems to kill it. Normally by now you'd expect to see some sort of improvement, but seriously 4 to 5 hours of screen on time per charge is all I'm getting. So I'm going to continue to use the iPhone 15 Pro Max for another few weeks, see if the situation does improve, but it's not looking great. With the basic YouTube style battery test, things are a bit more even. I tried playing a downloaded video with the Wi-Fi knocked off on both of these handsets side by side, and you get several hours of action from a full charge. So you can watch that Avatar film about 3 times right through if you are a bit of a mentalist. And when it comes to powering back up again, well, again, the Samsung is superior to that iPhone with its 45 watt wired charging. So even though it's got a bigger battery, it does fill up much quicker. With the iPhone, you're going to be charging it overnight as well as probably once or twice during the day. And both the S23 Ultra and the iPhone 15 Pro Max support wireless charging, as you'd expect when you spunk out over $1,000 on a smartphone. Again, the Sammy is faster using that Qi wireless charging, but the iPhone also supports MagSafe charging at 15 watts. So let's finish this side-by-side S23 Ultra versus iPhone 15 Pro Max comparison with a squint at the cameras. And it's very different tech here because you've got a 200 megapixel ISOCELL HP2 of Samsung's own creation here on the Galaxy S23 Ultra, and that's versus a 48 meg sensor here on the iPhone, both of them with optical image stabilization. And that camera app is pretty dense with features on both of these blowers. The iPhone gets some bonus points for being more one-handed friendly. Most of the toggles are down here at the bottom rather than way up at the top of this gargantuan beast here. But it does then also lose those bonus points by squirreling away most of the camera settings in the actual phone settings menu rather than the camera app for some reason. Now, I shot these side-by-side test photos using the default camera settings on full auto mode, the way that most people will inevitably use these blowers. And in daytime with decent lighting, the S23 Ultra generally produced brighter pics thanks to its larger sensor and pixel binning. Although crop into a photo and that sharper resolution on the iPhone means you get slightly finer detail. Colours tend to look more natural on Apple sample shots too, a little bit more saturated on the Samsung, although the iPhone does occasionally produce overly warm results, while Samsung once again brightens those tones so they really pop. In HDR style situations, both of these phones tend to artificially boost darker regions so they are clear and bright, which isn't ideal if you're after a moody, shadowy shot. But for everyday snaps, most people should appreciate this bit of post-processing. And if rather than relying on that auto mode, you'd rather shoot a raw image to tweak yourself after the fact, well, no worries, you can shoot Pro RAW here on the iPhone, and you can shoot a good bit of RAW here on the S23 Ultra too. You got all the bonus modes that you would expect, including of course good old portrait mode, which pumps out some really nice looking bokeh style action on both of these phones. As for the night mode, well, Samsung performs better here, especially as any light sources tend to flare up on my iPhone samples. Although Apple's slab once again serves up slightly more detail compared with that S23 Ultra, and neither are particularly grainy. Colours are again brighter and bolder with the Samsung, making for a more attractive snap overall. You got all those classics like the panorama mode, slow motion, etc on both of these blowers. The Samsung, you've also got classics like single take. And you've got to love the iPhone's sticker tool, which is fully automatic and it works well on people, cats, inanimate objects, all kinds of stuff. As for the ultra-wide angle shooters, we got a pair of 12 megapixel sensors here, if you want a more dramatic angle, and it is a very similar story to the primary sensors as far as that picture quality goes. Of course, it's the zoom action that Apple has been making a big whoop about. What you've got here on the Pro Max is a 12 meg telephoto lens with 5 times optical zoom, 120mm focal length. Meanwhile, Samsung has a pair of 10 megapixel telephoto shooters, one working at 3 times optical zoom, the other offering 10 times zoom. That's a 69 and a 230mm focal length. You've got optical image stabilization both, and while Samsung can zoom in up to 100 times in total, Apple hits the ceiling at just 25 times. Although if you max out that zoom, you will get a crappy pic with either of these blowers. At every stage past the 10 times zoom level, the S23 Ultra unsurprisingly serves up finer detail, and it copes with stronger lighting more capably. However, in low light, the Samsung is so much better, it's almost funny. I mean, I don't even know what the f this is supposed to be. It looks like something I shot on a Game Boy camera. As for the video side of things, well, very happy with both of these handsets. The Galaxy S23 Ultra can shoot up to 8K resolution video, but I tested both phones at the more sensible 4K res, which comes with a choice of 30 or 60 FPS. Honestly, these two manufacturers have absolutely nailed it on this front. Visuals are bright, crisp and fluid with impressive stabilization even when you aren't using the built-in motion modes. So everything looks smooth even if you're walking at a pretty decent pace. Audio capture is clean and clear as long as you're not shooting video in any gusty conditions. And even at night, you should be reasonably happy with the results. As for the selfie cams, well, it's a 12 meg shooter on both of these blowers, and a similar sort of story to the rear cams. To be honest, the color reproduction completely different on both of them, but you should be happy enough if you just want to share a simple Instagrammable shot. Got a bit of portrait mode action, and no worries if you're shooting against a strong backlight and or in fairly low light conditions. They'll do fine. So that right there, in a tasty wee nutshell, is how the fresh new iPhone 15 Pro Max stacks up against that Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. And I gotta say, personally, of the two, I would certainly choose the Sammy smartphone, even though I don't really make much use of that S Pen stylus. Personally, I get on better with Android, but also the cameras just offer that wee bit more flexibility, and the battery life is certainly a big step up. That said, I'll keep on slogging on with the iPhone. I'll test it for a few more weeks ahead of my in-depth review, because I really want to see if that battery life improves at all. Not to mention a few of the other little software bugs and other issues I've had. Definitely check out my 1 week review with the iPhone, which should be going live tomorrow. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a really wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!